Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for the final part, number 3 of Day 9 Daily number 371, where we learn to be a better gamer. We're looking at Sase's PvT drop play. We're looking at variations on it, cool things he has done before he gets to that key launch platform where he can do the drop harass. And we just got done with some games where we saw what he does after as being a little bit different. And this last game, it's going to be a game between Sase and Slayer's Boxer, where we're going to end up seeing some big problems that can arise after the fact, after you do some of these fun little tactics and harassments. Thus far, it seemed to work every time, but in this game, it's not quite going to work. Let me straight off the bat say, in this game, Sase does not do the warp prism drops. And it's very easy to watch this game and say to yourself, oh no, he's doing something completely different. We're going to see how it actually relates directly to this warp prism harass and exactly what ends up going wrong. So first, let's go ahead and see all the usual opening things. Let's assume that we have no idea whether Sase is going to be doing his drop or not, but we know that there's this convergence point that we want to get to. 3 gateways, 1 robo, and an expansion. He pops in, sees absolutely no gas. What do we conclude? Our opponent probably early expanding. What do we do then? We're going to expand immediately ourselves on 19 food and get our cybernetics core starting the warp gate ASAP. Perfect. Let's chrono boost that stalker out because we know we can actually harass our opponent a little bit since he has no marauders with concussive shell. We're getting our gas geyser up immediately because we really do need a lot of sentries for our style. We could probably add on a couple more gateways in addition to be able to do some additional defense. We don't really need our robo up too quickly. Here's our stalker doing harassment and map control, and SCV doing a little bit of scouting. Our Nexus finishing up. My goodness, is this looking similar or what? In fact, yep, there's the robo facility. This looks exactly like the very first game we saw in part number 1 between Sase and Bomber. It looks a lot like he's setting himself up for some nice defense with these sentries, and his War Prism play could be soon to follow. In the Units Lost tab, we actually see a Stalker was killed off by Boxer. Sase should have been a little bit careful with that. Not a big deal. We see 2 sentries popping out. We see, it looks like an observer popping up as well. And a 3rd gateway going down. Yay! And that literally gets us right back to where we need to be. With this sentry heavy, 3 sentries. An expansion, 3 gateways, and a robo. Good! Now, we're going to stop right now and ask the following question. Why on earth is that warp prism harass so good? What makes it so good? The answer is that it forces Terran to be on the defensive, which buys us time to get up things like upgrades and Colossus. Also, it allows us to hit him wherever he's weak. If we have access to the back and access to the front by walking there, whatever is weak, we can start doing some damage to. A big danger that you will encounter when you try to be like Sase and you try to do the drops, the big danger you'll encounter is that you will hit him where he's strong. You will do the drop at the back of his base and think, ooh, maybe I can warp in some units and try to kill him off. You warp in the units, and suddenly this huge army's right there, and you're like, argh, and you lose the warp prism and 8 units, the 4 inside the warp prism and the 4 you tried to warp in. What a catastrophe. Or you bring the warp prism to the back of his base, you drop 1 zealot, and you think, cool, he's distracted, and then you go to the front, and as it turns out, your opponent still had all his defense there. Again, the tactic is with the drop at the back and the stuff at his front is you want to hit him where he's weak. What Sase is going to do is not necessarily warp prism harassment. It's going to be warp in harassment. He's going to build a pylon right here, and he's going to use an observer to just kind of sneak up onto the high ground. Sase being damn bold with those units. Again, he wants to try to hit him at the front and maybe hit him a little bit at the back. We see this observer starting to swing on in. Alright, cool. We're buying ourselves some time. We see the robotics bay. If we're warping things in at his back, then Boxer's going to be pretty distracted. See, look at this. A single zealot being warped in. Remember in that last game we saw with Bomber? We only warped in one Zealot, and it was enough to force Bomber to bring all his stuff back. So we end up doing a little bit of damage. Don't over-obsess and think how many SCVs were killed. Was it an economically equivalent exchange? Is that good or bad? Well, the important thing is that Boxer's having a hard time dealing with it because he's thinking, yeah, God, I gotta have stuff at the front to defend and stuff at the back to defend. Didn't even really bring any Marines back. So this is buying Sase more time. This is good stuff. It's buying him more time. Come on, Sase. I know you're going to warp in pretty soon again. Sase. 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 Sase ends up doing a warp in at some point. Either way, he has his opponent distracted. He's bought himself enough time to get these long-term plays up. The range, the +1. He has 3 gateways up. He does build these emergency 2 cannons to be able to defend against this sort of snap push that Boxer does. And Sase again goes for these nice little warp-ins. This would be a lot more aggressive if Sase was having a warp prism with 4 units right there, could load in, throw down the force fields, see how many units were there to defend, and then make that snap judgment of whether to pull in or pull out. This bothered me a little bit that he didn't have that option available. But Sase is by no means behind. Boxer doing this nice ghost push, Sase deflects it with ease. So now all of a sudden we are back once again. Let's say that you just came in the room and you just walked in and said, what does the game state look like? Protoss is well defended and is well on his way to having these 2 upgrades. Terran can't really do any drop harass pressure back to Sase. Sase has a clear upper edge. Does it matter if he went Warp Prism or not beforehand? Not really. Sase is in a good position. This is the second big thing that I'm worried about for you. The first thing was that you would overcommit to an area where your opponent was strong. You try to be dropping too hard in his back when he had way too much defense there in the back. The second big thing is you're not going to think enough about this after the harass position. We're going to see Sase slowly steer away from a lot of the big mass damaging units. He gets a lot of speed zealots, which are great in these middle-ishly large engagements, but it's the after the fact where Sase starts to really kind of struggle. So we're going to see Sase have this nice defensive army. He's getting his 3rd base up. He goes and does this little poke and prod. And remember this kind of look, this push. Where's that 2nd Colossus? There, he's coming now. Remember this little attack? Sase did this against Bomber, and it worked great. Sase did this similar looking thing against Boxer in another game, and it worked out okay. But this is the hitting him where he's strong kind of thing. Right now, there are none of Boxer's forces at the back of the base. There's not even money wasted on turrets at the back of the base. The Observer sees this army here. This kind of push can work, but you have to be so careful not to hit him where he is strong, because then you run the risk of something like this happening, where your opponent just straight up kills you off. And now we're in a little bit of a bind. This will happen to you a lot when you're trying to practice this Sase style. It will happen to you a ton. Don't be upset. Don't freak out at all. Just try to readjust for the next game. And Sase, bluntly, is not dead by a long shot. He does have his 3 bases up. He has all those key upgrades up. He's getting some immortals. Probably should have had these gateways up a little earlier, but you know what? Look at his upgrades. He's already at 1-1, chrono boosting his way to 2-2, looking good in the hood, baby. But one thing that stems from this aggressive style of play that Sase is so good at is that generally the Terran player is all on the defense and Sase can sit at the front and be cool. When suddenly you cannot be on the offense as Protoss, you have to think defensively minded. These little pushes by Boxer rip Sase apart. Again, Sase has an incredible comfort when he has the game flow, when he has control over the state of the game. But we see this this marginal weakening at times like this. Some force fields get thrown down. Immortals good in middle-ish numbers, really bad when the armies get huge because of the EMPs and their inability to do some area effect damage. And look, again, walks right up to the front. You need to be a little more active about that sort of positioning. Also Colossus doing his own thing, all little Colossus. So as we speed this game up, let's do this exercise again. Suppose you just came into the room and you asked, what does Sase need to do? My immediate gut reaction is, oh, we're at 160. We really need to start getting Storm, or we need to start getting a lot of Colossi up, because right now we have none. We have just Zealots and Immortals and Stalkers. This is the after-the-fact thing. In many circumstances, this army is okay to build. Why is that army sometimes okay to build? The answer is that most of the time you've been battering Terran down, beating his face into the ground, making him bite the curb and stomping on the back of his head. You've been doing that, so this kind of army is easy to get quickly to deal the finishing blow. You are not in finishing blow mode. You need to begin getting some Storm up. Archons are good, again, in these middle-ish size armies, but when it starts being max versus max, when your opponent has a lot of EMPs, you start to run some real dangers. I remember I actually casted this game live. You can actually see me. I'm actually Blue A. I believe Blue B was Husky at that point in time. Maybe it was Marcus. I just don't remember. And this is looking... Oh, look at this very scary-looking army. Here's another scary-looking army from Boxer. And watch how this engagement goes. How badly is Sase going to lose it? Way worse than you would ever imagine. Way worse than I think anyone imagined. Watch this. He goes in for the engagement. Holy crap. Boxer hardly even lost anything. He has a huge army left over. And now all of a sudden we're just left warping in Zealots. And Sase loses shortly thereafter. He's trying to morph in a bunch of Immortals as kind of like a holy crap save me. These needed to be up a lot earlier. So, to sort of recap what we did in this game, this was an example of Sase setting himself up in a very similar fashion to the other games. Buying himself a lot of times. Buying himself a lot of time to get the Colossus up. Not doing the warp prism harass, but doing this warp in harass and kind of accomplishing some of the same goals. And this set himself up beautifully. We saw a kind of collapse after the fact where really kind of have to be aware of when it's time to be a defender instead of an attacker, and how important it is to make sure that for those big engagements you either have lots of Colossi, lots of Storm, or both. So let's recap the 4 games. Game number 1 did the basic introduction to the build, showed how it gets you a lot of time bought, and most importantly, how to turn those defensive sentries that were just there to help you against early pushes at the start of the game and turn them into attacker sentries. The second thing that we saw, in part number 2, we saw some variation in the opening, but still how Sase managed to pull back to the same warp prism harass against Boxer, hit him at the front a little, hit him at the back a little, be in good shape. In the third game, we saw a wildly aggressive game from Sase, where again, he hit him at the back with one single Zealot and then busted down the front door. Some cool examples of tactics. And in this last game, we see Sase setting himself up in an amazing position, very similar to the first 3 games, but making a late-on mistake with his composition that caused him to die. Oh, that was one of the most organized dailies I have ever had, with the exception of when I loaded up the wrong replay in part number 2. How tragiquement. God, that daily kicked ass, and Sase's a fucking beast. Yeah! Markio, I hope your question grabber loads up properly, because I want to be taking dem questions. Dem questions need an answering. From Road to Diamond, who actually I saw ask this question after part 1. Day 9, I really like this play by Sase, but do you think he should also prioritize scouting since he has such strong map control? It seems Bomber's sneaky third let him take advantage of that kind of passivity. No matter what style of play you're doing, scout for those hidden expos. Seriously. It is way more common than anyone will ever admit. Everyone's always like, oh, you got so lucky he scouted, or he didn't scout the base and he got it up. Like, scout always, 100%. Hell, if you like 6 pool and do a ton of damage and he seems dead, it's time to scout, man, because a hidden expo is the only way he's really going to come back into this game. That's just a weakness with a ton of builds, is that they never take into account scouting. Like, way, way, way too often people don't do that. Scout, damn it, scout, scout, scout. So, Flemlezoid says, Dear Day 9, as the Terran, how would I respond to this style? It appears the way Boxer responded to it was sheer luck, position-wise. Is there a way to win purposefully in this situation? The best way to respond to it is to just be very, very careful with how you're handling the drops to make sure you obviously do not withstand that much damage. Your decision-making is more difficult just because people are figuring out how to make StarCraft 2 a harder game for you. But notice, what did Sase do? Sase said, is he weak at the front of his base, or is he weak at this Warp Prism side? You can do the same sort of thing as Terran from the other side. You can say, well, he's trying to drop me in the back, but maybe he's really weak in terms of units outside the front of my base. Very often, in my experience doing this warp play, I'd be getting ready, I'd be doing the sneaky drop. I'd drop at the back of his base, and I'd be like, yeah, run away, SCVs. And then he would scan the front, where I had like 2 Immortals and like 4 Sentries, and he would just stim and run down with a bunch of Marines, kill off all of that, lose 2 supply depots in his main, pull back, defend his main, and then come kill me. Like, things like that. You're also trying to identify some kind of weakness in your opponent's position, because he's going to be aggressively positioned, so maybe kill off one of those aggressive points. Also, do not overreact. When your starport finishes, get like a medivac and 1 Viking. Don't be like, he has warp prisms, VV, Viking, Viking. One of the most important things, though, is whenever your opponent is being aggressive, just get upgrades. Because when you finally stabilize and he can't attack you anymore, you want to have a pretty scary force to go kill him with, right? So make sure your force is scary. What you do not want to do is have a weak force and then go, oh god, I should have had upgrades. That is so embarrassing. You can even do things like when he's harassing, build a 3rd command center, start your upgrades, and then just play as though you're going for a crazy long-term game. Then when you finally move out to push, you take the expansion and you have a huge army. This is always fantastissimo. Here's a question from Arcane Magi. Day 9, why did Sase go for Archons in that last game? Boxer was clearly going Ghosts in the 4th game, and EMP would annihilate them. So, it actually does not have to do with the Ghosts. And in fact, in many circumstances, if your opponent is going Marine, Marauder, Ghost, you should go Zealot, Archon. This is kind of how it works. So let's say you go into your opponent's base, you do some drop harass, you freak him out, you maybe do some poking and proddings at the front, and he's like been battered, right? You have a little bit of a lead in terms of that economy. A great way to deal a finishing blow is to rush out a bunch of Speed Zealots and a bunch of Templar, boom, kill them with Zealot Archon straight up. That is the perfect finishing blow. Why not go for something super long-term tech, like getting a bunch of High Templar or getting a bunch of Colossus? Because if he's battered his economy down, his economy is going to be weak for a little while, but then it'll come back. The Zealot Archon can kill him quickly while he's weak, going for something slower and longer term, like Storm and having a lot of Colossi. That is good for a later period of time, and you can't exploit this weak part where he's at right now. It's very similar to a Zerg player who's like, yeah, this Protoss is really weak, so I'm just going to only build Roaches, and I don't care if you're building Immortals, because I have 200 Roaches, and you have, what, 110 food? I can win right now, quickly. I have a kill sequence. So the reason I think Sase was incorrect for him to go Archons was not necessarily the Ghosts. It was, my opponent's economy is doing pretty damn well right now. There's no weakness to exploit with Zealot Archon. I'm not on the verge of dying, so I don't need to get emergency Archons to stay alive. I'm kind of in this middle period where he's probably not going to be attacking me quite right now, and I'm not quite going to be attacking him right now. And that's the big reason I think it was incorrect. Sure, there are going to be Ghosts in all sizes of Terran army near the late game, but I especially think it was the fact that they were both doing well economically there. Again, Amnesia streaming is going to be next week on Monday. Let's go ahead and take one more question. Aha! A pair says, Dear Day 9, it seems like Warp Prism is always better than Observers against a Terran who opens up with no gas and early expands. Is this a dangerous conclusion to make? So, this is the exact logic that I love a lot. I love the statement that A pair just made. If my opponent goes no gas and early expands, I will go straight for a Warp Prism and harass him. I love strong statements like this, where you're always ready to drop it on a dime. So what do I mean by this? So let's say I'm A pair, and I think to myself, okay, I'm just going to get my Warp Prism, and I'm going to harass him if he's early expanding. I'm just always going to do that, always. I will do it relentlessly until I have a reason not to. It's great to have these sorts of solid rules because then you have clear decisions already made for you. You're not doing guesswork or even worse, second guessing yourself. A lot of times you can discover that there are some amazing spots where this actually will always work. The worst thing that will happen is not bad at all. The worst that'll happen is you realize, oh shit, in these two circumstances, I really do need the Observer. So what do? 99 times out of 100, you get the Warp Prism. And then 1 time out of 100, you get the Observer because you have an idea that he could be doing something else. You have some experience that would tell you he's doing something else where you need it. You can happily conclude things like that wrongly and then learn at a much quickened pace. So for instance, you could say something like, if my opponent is rushing for Banshee, I will always get the Warp Prism first. And you will find out that that only works like 30% of the time. But that process of learning where you found out, holy shit, I can actually get away with a Warp Prism 30% of the time. This is actually useful. In this 70%, I'm actually going to get the Observer. But hell, I'm a person that understands when I can Warp Prism harass a fast Banshee-ing player, and that's cool. That's where I want you to be. So I think there's nothing wrong with that, but again, be willing to step back from it. Be willing to step back from it. Do never fall into that trap where you're like, oh, I made a Warp Prism against an early expander, which is obviously the correct decision, and you won with your luck-based percentage build. Don't do that. Don't do that. Feel free to have strong opinions. Execute with confidence. And in between games, doubt these little rules you have. Tomorrow I'll be driving up to San Francisco because I am going to have a meal that costs way more money than I should spend on a meal. On Sunday I'll be returning back for what? That is right, US subscriber free-for-all battles, where these players do not have locked alliances. They may re-ally, they may backstab. The most important thing is that only one may win in the end, so backstabbing must at the very least occur once. I'm excited. That's going to be for the American servers and for the subscribers only. Again, Day 9 TV has the voluntary subscription service where you may, if you desire, donate $5 per month to help support the show. This, of course, helps ensure that the show will always remain free, which, honestly, it always will because it's my show and I would never want to charge you money for it. But again, if you would like to donate, you may at justin.tv/day9tv/subscribe. It is a way to allow you to gift to me, so that way I can gift back to you these sorts of crazy fun little events. And there's going to be even more stuff in the future. It should never cost more than $5, but there will always be more free shit added to it. Yeah! That'll be happening Sunday, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. I was delighted with how this daily turned out. I was really, really, really happy, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Take care, guys. Take care. Amnesia is on Monday. It's on Monday. Free-for-all subscriber battles will be on Sunday at 7 p.m. It will be Sunday, 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 Sunday.